Now let's get a little bit more into this with David Biello. He's an editor of Scientific American and he hosts an environmental series on the U.S. Public Broadcasting Network. Thank you so much for joining us. You know, David, there's a huge question about whether the countries in attendance can even agree on the basics. So how much hope is there that the talks will end with its stage set for the big talks next year in Paris?
I can say this, we're a lot closer than we've ever been. The countries of the world are on the precipice, really, of the first global agreement to do something about a global problem, which is climate change.
You know, we've been talking about the UN's Green Climate Fund. It just reached its $10 billion goal. How much of this is countries taking the dangers of climate change seriously, and how much of it is just throwing money into a fund to say that they're doing something without really changing anything at home?
Well, it's a little bit of both, as in all things climate change. We have countries like Australia who at home do things like repeal their carbon tax and therefore have pollution rise, but contributing money to this Green Climate Fund. Or you have countries like the U.S. committing $3 billion and committing in that historic agreement with China to cut emissions at an even faster pace.
Let's talk a little bit about your work. Right now, you're working on a book about how people are reshaping the planet. When it comes to the impact of people on the planet, we hear all the time about the bad news. Is there some good being done, and what can you tell us about that?
There's certainly good being done around the world. I think we can all agree that people want to do the right thing. Obviously, burning fossil fuels is contributing to the problem of climate change. Reversing that is the key to dealing with global warming. And as we've seen in recent months and years, the price of renewable energy is going down. China is building a lot of nuclear power plants, which will cut their coal use. And cars are getting more efficient. There's a lot of good news around the world, although we tend to focus on the bad.
And you just said that the countries are closer than ever before. What are your hopes for a breakthrough at that 2015 climate talk, the talks in Paris? Do you think there will be a breakthrough agreement, and what do you think it would look like?
Well, we have a 52-page document right now that is kind of a wish list, everything that all 190 nations of the world kind of want out of a climate change treaty. They're going to have to pare that down and make some significant decisions about what goes in and what goes out. But actually, this bilateral agreement between the U.S. and China paves the way for this much broader agreement. The U.S. and China are on opposite sides of the development fence. The U.S. obviously being a long-standing rich country, China being a rapidly developing one. And for the first time, a developing country has agreed that CO2 emissions have to stop. And that is something that has been fought over for literally decades in the UN climate change arena. Now that that particular barrier has fallen, it's a question of what kind of agreement we're going to get, not whether we're going to get an agreement.
David Biello, editor of Scientific American, thank you so much for joining us from New York.